Welcome back to the panel. We're going to be building ships, bigger ships, please. And if we're going to do that, we're going to have to tell people that we're here. We're going to have to tell people about our game. We're going to have to prepare them for it. And I know most of us got into making games because we just want to make games. So it's very tempting to just make this game and then shove it out the door and hope it survives. You wouldn't do that with your kids, would you? So, you know, think of it as putting your game in school or giving it a coach or something. You need to think about getting it out there. And maybe you need to think about it a little bit earlier. So what we've done in our infinite wisdom is to bring together 4 very different profiles here. We have a AAA developer, we have a publisher, we have an indie, and we have a PR bureau. So we're going to discuss how to do this. So first off, we have this gentleman here. If you see his Facebook image up there, he looks pretty scary, but at the same time, you know, he just launched Hitman, so I don't know if that's how you look after launching a AAA title, but I also Googled him, as you see on the right. It's a little difficult to see, but it's very obvious if you Google him, he's a really nice guy. So this is Nick Price. And our second panelist is Carsten Fichtelmann, who you've already met, and who's taken the journey that some of us could maybe take from small indie developer to longboat, or actually maybe by now he's got his own fleet of longboats. So when I grow up, I want to be like Carsten. Then we have Frederik Schreiber. Him and his partner took over everybody's favorite 3D shooter factory just because they felt like it. He's also launched Rise of the Triad, which was very successful, and just launched a new IP. He's the King of the North in Denmark, Frederik Schreiber. And finally, but definitely not least, we have, and I'm going to try to pronounce this correctly, Salima Bessahraoui.
Very good.
Really?
That's why people call me Brolima instead. It's easier.
You're welcome to do that when you look her in the eye over.
And you have to high-five me as well. So.
That's you she's talking to. So here we have Salima is from Cosmocover, which is an award-winning PR agency, and she's launched hundreds of digital titles. And she's comfortable working with the tech kings at Unity as much as the bad boys at Devolver. So there's a broad range of experience here. And this is our panel. And the way it's going to go down is that first I'm going to present our fictional project, or company. And then I'm going to ask each of the panelists to give us a quick pitch of what they each think we should be doing, PR-wise and communication-wise. And then we're going to get into the fight, because of course we hope that everybody disagrees so we can have some really decent arguments. I've been promised no physical contact until afterwards. So finally, I'm going to sum up. So I'm going to start by introducing this fictional project. I'd like you to think of me as the CEO of a small Danish indie. That's not difficult. I have been the CEO of a small Danish indie. And we are embarking on a journey. We're going to make a new game, and it's going to be a new IP. It's also going to take 2-3 years, we estimate. Although listening to Carsten, it may take 6 years. But you know, we're aiming for 2 to 3 years to launch, and we're starting now. We don't have a publisher, not yet. We've been to GDC a few times, so we're talking to some people, and definitely interest and so on. But you know, not yet. We funded the first 6 months of our core team, maybe through grants, maybe through profits from our last game. And our record shows that we can finance it. So, you know, we know how to make applications, we know how to talk to investors and business angels and so on. We have a little bit of money in the bank. We can do this. We're never going to lose hope. And then business model and target audience, my idea is that you should pretty much take your pick. So use what your experience tells you. And if you're in doubt, I would say it's an episodic indie. So we're going to make it episodic. We're going to keep launching stuff. And yeah, we're indies. So that's our case. And I don't know if there's anybody who would like to raise their hand and start and give us an idea for, okay, so maybe this is just a consulting meeting, you know? You're just advising here at the start, how should we be thinking about PR? Nick, you're nodding. I'm
Apparently
going to take that as a
raising
sign
my hand.
of readiness.
Okay. So in my experience, probably one of the most important things is actually to make sure that you think about your communication and your PR from day one, as soon as you possibly can. Don't think about this as, yeah, we're making a game, and at some point we also need to talk about this game to someone, right? Because that's going to be a huge mess when you realize how much work there actually is involved in talking to people. So just figuring out what the key pillars are of the game, figuring out what is my game, why is this a special game. Don't develop a pitch that says that it's kind of like this game, but it has these elements from these other games, because A, people may not have played them, and B, it's not a unique game in that case, right? It's not your game. So make sure that from day one you figure out, why am I actually making this game? Why am I able to recruit people to help build this game? Because if you can do that, then you can also pitch it to journalists in a really personal, interesting way. Journals will have a shitload, pardon my language, of games pitched to them every day, so you need to stand out somehow, right? If you go too early, you're in trouble, because you may not have anything to show, so it's super important that you actually have something very concrete to show. Don't try to go out to people and say, so we have this idea for a game. We can't really show you too much, but we would really like for you to write about these 5 things that we would like you to report on, so people may hear about us, right? That's not really going to work for you. Make sure you practice your pitch a lot. I'm getting a weird vibe in my ear, which is kind of annoying. John, are you fooling around? No? Sorry. Okay, yeah, it's just weird for me.
Voices in your head.
Oh, they're telling me to do things.
That's PR for you.
No, but make sure you actually practice your pitch a lot, right? You're going to be doing this a bazillion times at conferences, at weird interventions where you meet people randomly down by the toilet at events like this, and you need to be prepared to sell your game, right? So make sure you know it by heart. Make sure you don't hate it, so choose your words wisely. And keep being enthusiastic. That's super important. I would say that the ideal time probably for a lot of indies to go out is actually reasonably close to when you're done with the game, primarily because you can then show things, you can give people stuff that they can actually play. Nobody's going to be super interested in just having you pitch a game and then not being able to see it or feel it or see videos or anything like that. Even if you're playing it, that's okay. We do that a lot as well. At I.O., we don't necessarily give people hands-on because, let's face it, up until very late in the process, your game is going to be super broken because that's how it works, right? But you can choose the ideal path. So make sure you know all of that. Make sure you plan it as early as possible, so that there are no nasty surprises along the way.
Thank you.
So just one more thing. Basically, you have 3 beats in your campaign: the announcement, which needs to be super impactful. Then you have the first time that people actually play your game, and then you have review. If you can combine the first 2, you're probably in a good place, because otherwise you end up having a reasonably long campaign potentially, and that will likely not do you any favors unless you have a dedicated resource. Maybe you can get a PR agency to help you out. That's probably a good idea, but it costs money, and if you can't fund the game, then obviously you can't fund a PR company.
That was good advice. Thank you very much. Salima, maybe you can go next?
Actually, I kind of agree with you. I would just add something. If you just have like 6 months of funding, don't just think of like going to PR right away. Think of your game first, because if you make a great game, you know what? You'll get visibility and you'll get coverage. Because you know what? Journalists, they talk to each other, they know each other. So just focus on your game first. That's not really like a PR advice, but it is actually. So take the time to polish your game. And I would add, just wrap up a great demo and take that demo to conferences, show that demo to people, but just once, and put together great assets. Because the first asset you're going to show will stay forever. So if you just release, I would say, crappy artworks, or if you show some like non-finished project, people will remember that, and they will probably not review your game that well. So the first, you cannot launch twice. This is very important. It's like your virginity. You just lose your virginity once. To be honest, just you cannot launch twice. And a lot of people come to us, I'm like, I have this game, but you know what? We released it too soon, and we had no coverage. What can you do for us? And I'm like, sorry guys, it's too late. It's too late for you. So just have one window of opportunity. And the only thing I'd like to tell to indies is, guys, you have great games sometimes, but why do you want to release them the same day as Call of Duty or FIFA? You know, it's like you have Barack Obama getting into that room right now. And on the other hand, you have my good neighbor, Martin, getting in. Who are you looking at? Are you looking at Barack Obama or my neighbor? I think you're going to look for Barack Obama. So just choose carefully your launch window. It's very important. So usually avoid September, October, November, because most of the AAA titles are released in that time frame. So that's my 2 cents advice for now.
Thank you very much.
I would like to add to the you only release once is that's not necessarily true if it's an episodic game. Actually, you can obviously you will.
The first episode will stay forever.
And I totally agree. But you actually will have multiple entry points after that as well. So if you are going down that route, don't screw up the first release, obviously, right? Because then people won't know what's happening. But you can pick it up afterwards, hopefully. If episode 2 is good. Otherwise, it's a problem. You can see it with games like Life is Strange and so on. They released okay to begin with, but it actually kind of increases along the way because more and more people are talking about it, and suddenly there's a huge amount of buzz. It will also present you with massive challenges in terms of suddenly you need to do enormous campaigns, so you need dedicated resources for that. But potentially that's a good investment as well.
Great. Thank you. Frederik?
Yeah, I kind of disagree with you.
Okay.
Yes.
No, so going back to your point about releasing in the Q4 release window, it is true if you're developing a high-end premium, big budget title, of course you don't want to compete with Call of Duty for coverage and exposure. But if you're a smaller indie game, you can actually ride on that exposure. When the Call of Duties and the Assassin's Creed and so on come out in that Q4 time frame, you also have to think that that's when probably 80% of all the sales during the year of a AAA game takes place. That means that all eyes are on Steam. There's only one picture on the rotator, that's for Call of Duty. The next one might be your indie game. Because no other AAA game want to release that same month. That's why they split it up, between September, October, November, and then December, where no games release. So it can be a benefit. It's extremely risky, but you will get a ton of eyes on your project. And if your project is a $10 game and not a $60 game or 90 plus all the DLC and exclusive access content and so on, you're not in the same demographic anymore either in terms of pricing, which means that a guy who buys Call of Duty might also be able to, pay for your game, have the budget for your game. But I do agree, if you're developing Hitman, for instance, you don't want to release it the same day as Call of Duty. Or maybe you will. All depends.
No.
But yeah. So I do agree on that. And going back to Nick, your most important marketing PR beat is the launch. We had 2 different strategies we tried with our 2 different games. One was the community-driven effort, where we tried to pinpoint a specific launch time to a specific person. We tried to get a hold of Todd Hollinshead, who was the CEO of id Software, and he ran QuakeCon. And we felt that QuakeCon was the perfect crowd for our game, so we picked a convention where all the journalists who likes first-person shooters and all the hardcore shooter fans are present. And then we wanted to see if we could get a reveal on stage with playable on the floor, because we had no budget. So we just had to ask and say, hey, this is a pretty cool little thing. Would you like to help us do that? And then the entire PR effort was community driven. Luckily, this game was the only non-id Software game revealed, so it got a lot of press. But most of it was community driven. We had an open development, so we shared developer diaries every week, and we live streamed, and we shared the entire progress from the review to the finished product, because that's what we could afford. But our other game, we tried the other approach, the more classic approach. And to be honest, the end result in terms of exposure was kind of the same. We didn't have millions of dollars to put into marketing for Bombshell, but we got the exposure, and we did a more we took a more indie-friendly approach. We found a single-man marketing firm We used Uber Strategist. We heard a lot of good things about Mario Kroll from Uber Strategist, and we hired him on a retainer. Most single-man PR firms works on a retainer. Usually it's around 2,500. And we cut him on a retainer for the last 3 months of production before release. We had our own internal plan, but we used him solely for the most basic PR, which is reaching out to journalists. Because usually if you reach out yourself and you spam, how 100 journalists, you end up in the spam folders. But when a PR firm does it, they usually know it's serious. And we got around the same coverage, and that was a new IP. But all the marketing efforts we had to do internally. We could not afford it. And we actually did that one mistake that you talked about with Bombshell. We announced it prematurely. And that announcement, that was not the game that we were actually going to make. We canceled the game after the announcement and started over. But that announcement and that screenshot from that game is still haunting us today. We're still, every time a new article comes up, they use that picture because it's the first one that shows up on Google. And we tell them, please don't use that picture because that's not the game at all. It's not representative of what we want. So yes, don't announce prematurely. We announced Duke Nukem Forever in '98, and then again in 2001, and then again in 2007, and then it finally came out in 2011. That is probably the most notorious example of announcing something prematurely and getting hit hard for it when it releases.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's almost in the same league as your game for delays.
Well, not exactly 14 years, but it's...
Hopefully it is a good league. Agree and disagree. I think that every game is different, and it's quite important that you have a tailor-made plan for every game. And for example, we had a little discussion in the break about Kickstarter and about early access. And when we talk about changes, then definitely we saw many changes about PR and how PR is done in the gaming industry. And I myself studied business administration and worked then for some years as a journalist, and I started in the game industry as PR and marketing manager at a publisher. So in all the changes I saw in the last 15 years, then there were many changes. So and you need to be confident and clear that you need to come up for every game with quite a different idea of doing and approaching to media with it. For example, when I said we released Deponia Doomsday almost 4 weeks ago. So we had titles in the past where we started 2 or 3 years before the release communicating about the game. In this special case, we know it was a fourth part in a quite successful gaming series, and we did know that everyone who played the first games will be very excited when we announce the game. And so the idea was announcing the game, and then the game should be out at the same day. That was not possible, but we announced the game 5 days before the release, and boom, we were number 1 on Steam. And maybe some people would give us advice before, no, you need to start 6 months before, that's too late, whatever. So the most important point is every game is different, and you need to find the right communication strategy for every game. Also, when you see what may change in the next 2 years, and you're still in production.
Oh damn! Every game is unique. I keep hearing that. Okay, so if every game is unique, and I think we heard that across the board here, the question for me becomes, how do you structure an organization to handle this? Because if we have to develop a unique solution every time, and we have to handle our journalists and our process and so on uniquely every time, then what kind of PR team do we need? Can I start with you? What do you do in your company? What kind of manpower do you dedicate?
So normally we did this in the past totally internally, and we also worked as a PR agency for other companies, and it was also part of funding the company working as an agency. And if you remember my presentation, I this is not something what we do anymore. So We do it internally, and we do it sometimes with help of agencies. So it also depends on the game. So when we, for example, doing a big Hollywood IP game, or we're now doing that game with Ken Follett based on Pillars of the Earth. So for here we have totally different media also, which we need to approach. General interest media where normally you have then reviews for books, and so you need to add this to your, let's say, normal plan. So you have a checklist what you normally should do, and you definitely should do this, and you have then some extras. But the most important thing is the talk to the journalist, and you need to understand how journalists think and work, and what they need, and what they need at what time. This is the most important thing.
So out of 155 people, how many people do you have working on marketing, sales, PR, communication?
It's about 7 people right now internally.
7?
Yeah.
That's not a lot out of 155. But that's what you need.
I don't know. When you see other publishers also with AAA titles, it depends. When you have the right person and who is capable of doing that job, so it is totally it's very difficult to convince people at media outlets like Kotaku, Destructoid, or PC Gamer, or whatever, Polygon. But if you have that person who is capable of convincing these people in a one-on-one speech or call, then you have everything you need, and then you have maybe 10 other people who are not capable of doing this, and this is the thing.
It's like the old Victorian housewife advice, which is get good help. So Nick, in IO, how many are you now? 200?
We have lots of help. We're around, I don't know, how many are we actually? 180 or something like that at IO. But we're fortunate in the sense that we obviously have Square Enix, just kind of driving huge trucks full of money into IO HQ every week or month, more or less. No, we have a pretty substantial marketing budget, obviously, for the games that we put out. So structurally, the way that we work is that at IO we set out the entire strategy for the game, because we know the game. Square kind of knows the game, but we're embedded, so we understand how the game works. And from day one, we sit down and we start looking at features and figuring out how do we talk about them, what's important, what's not important, what makes this unique, and so on. And we have an internal team that sort of builds out the overall strategy. And then we have regional offices, Square offices, that have PR people attached to them. So maybe that's an additional 10 people. Some of them then further employ agencies, because Square has a bazillion titles coming out every year. So we've got an army of people who help us do this, right? And that means that I don't need to figure out what journalist at what outlet I should talk to about this game that we're making. Someone else does that for me, but someone else actually does that as well, right? You need to understand who to talk to. You can't just send an email to random person at Kotaku and then expect them to pick up a new story, because maybe they don't care about stealth games.
So it's a relationship.
Right? Eventually it will become a relationship. But I think to begin with, what you need to understand is just who would actually be interested in sending the story that I want to have told further on out into the world, right? Then, as well, internally, what you also need to think about is someone needs to create all the assets that actually go out. So the screenshots, the videos, the renders, whatever, logos, all that kind of stuff. And it's huge piles. So if you have one guy, or if you have no one, the load is on the team, right? Someone in the team needs to build this, whether that's the art director or whoever it is. Someone actually has to build that, right? Unless you have money to get an agency in, but then the agency will say, okay, but I need a functional build, and it needs to be super spiffy, and I need to be able to capture from it, and blah, 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 and then you have a whole new range of problems. So we struggle with all of these things as well, right?
So if you don't have truckloads of money arriving every Monday, and you're like 5 to 10 people, any advice?
Well, then you wait until the last possible moment, and then you just make a few really kick-ass assets. And then you direct them at the right people. Spend your time figuring out who the right people are. Get in touch with them. Don't cry if they don't respond, because in all likelihood a lot of them won't respond, because they need to understand who you are. But just keep going. It's a long, hard road, but it is almost as important, he says, heretically, as the development of the game itself, actually.
And I think that's a really interesting thing, because just having listened to you now, if I go back to my 10-man team, my first impulse is not to say, okay, we're going to dedicate a guy to PR. We're just going to make a good game. But at the same time, it's 50% of the equation. Schrodinger's cat is going to have a party here. So, Salima, any advice to our 5 to 10-man team? What do we do?
So if you've got 5 to 10 or 20 people, you've got just a little bit of money to fund your production, just again, focus on your production. Nonetheless, if you're a Danish developer and a couple of months before release, let's say 3 to 6 months before release, go to US guy, go to US freelancer, go to US agency, because that's definitely a big market for you. And if you're a European-based company, do not try to do it yourself, because it's going to be time-consuming, there's time difference, and yeah, Polygon or Kotaku are not going to respond to you right now. So it's very important just to have this little backup. It's a plan B in your roadmap. Know that you have a great PR guy, hire a freelancer, hire an agency in the US, known for launching similar titles, because they already know the journalists, and the journalists already trust them. So I would say just focus on big markets like the US, especially if you're not a native English-speaking person. On the other hand, I will probably give you the same advice I gave to actually the studio behind Life is Strange when they started their company. First, they had this game, and it was supposed to be a game like released by Sony, but in the end, they ended up like lonely, with no publishers, and they had this great project, but not enough money to finish the production. So what we did with these guys was very simple. You know what, guys? You're not going to show your game right now, because you're probably in the process of finding a publisher or a partner. What you're going to do is you're going to start wrapping up good assets, and you're just going to capitalize on your track record and tell your story. And team up with a local association. It could be the German one if you're German. It could be the French one if you're French. It could be the Nordic one. They usually have a booth at Gamescom. So we took these guys to Gamescom, and every year you have a couple of journalists that matters, like Kotaku, Polygon, Game Informer from the US. You also have from Germany. You have a lot of people from Germany. You have GameStar. You have Gameswelt. So you have these guys that matter. You have French medias as well. So what they did is they just told their story. Like Oscar and Jean-Max, like, this is what we do, this is what we've done before, and we have this dream, this is our game, this is our baby, we can't really show you the game, but they made internally this really nice teaser trailer, and after the first meeting, the guy from Kotaku left and he said, this is my favorite project from Gamescom. So nothing really, just people, you know, building up, not really their game, but you know, showing their vision to a couple of like journalists. So for me, it's very important. If you don't have money, just try to build up your own brand, not necessarily by sending out press releases or by hiring PR right away, but just know who you are, get this vision, and then, you know what, the rest will come later. But think of the US market. It was funny because people say, like, let's go to Asia. And the Asian market is very, very difficult. And most of the Asian bestsellers will probably not work in Europe, and the other way around. So first, I would say, you know what, focus on the Western European market and focus on the American market as well. So 3 months before release, hire an agency. In the US, there are some really, really good PR out there. For example, Stephanie, she's a very good PR. She's managing the Devolver lineup in the US. She's really like straightforward, and she's been there from day one. So try to work with people you trust. Try to work with people you like, because usually people say, you know, there's PR and there's production. They're part of the same group, they're part of the same team, it's a family. So if you work with somebody that you trust from day one, even though you don't have money, even though you're lost, even though you don't have a publisher, you can always ask that person. She will or he will support you till the end. So for me, that's my 2-cent piece of advice. Work with people that you like. And if you don't have the money, I think it's very important. In your studio, there's always a shiny personality. Most of the time, you have a great game designer. And he's outgoing, and he likes to talk. You know what? This guy can learn last-minute PR. It's quite simple. You know what? He's going to be the spokesperson, the only spokesperson in the team, not lead artist, you know what? Not coders. You know, sorry, coders, but, you know, sometimes you're way too weird. So just try to get this cool game designer with that cool vibe that can just build up your company track record. If you're just fresh out of school, let people know. Just don't pretend that you have a huge track record. Just be yourself. If you work for other publishers, tell that maybe this could give an impact to your PR profile. If you worked at Epic or Unity or Mythic or any big studios, just let people know there's probably a story, but don't talk about your game. Try to raise your profile. So find that guy in-house and just make him do some extra work, building up a press list of like 20 people, and journalists will advise you. If you tell them like, you know what, this is my project, what do you think? He's not going to write an article about it, but he will give you advice. So the most important thing for me over more than a decade of releasing game is just listen to feedback, because sometimes it can be painful. Your game is not ready to market. Your game is probably 2 out of 10 on
But we heard from Carsten that we should just not lose hope.
So just listen to feedback. And to be honest, I would say that sometimes no reviews is better than a bad review. So, and think of Metacritic as well. So.
No reviews is better than bad. I thought all PR was good PR.
No.
Yes.
No. Yes?
No.
There's no such thing as bad PR. That's been hanging over my typewriter for years.
No, I think it depends on the definition of PR. Some people think that PR is just making up stories. It could be a definition of PR. But for me, PR is really like making a studio or making a project really stands in its truth. It's just making sure that you just show who that game is. And do not necessarily try to compare your game to, I know that MOBAs are successful, so I'm going to make a MOBA. Or I know that endless runners are successful, so hey, it's a runner-like game, so I'm pretty sure you'll like it. No, just be yourself. And you know what? Don't try to just, be super like, I'm going to do this big launch event. Now you're going to just waste all your money. If you're indie, just be simple.
I like this thing about being yourself. I mean, that's good advice for a small team. Try to have a personality. Try to be somebody they can remember and so on. And I guess everything changes once you have a hit. It's just a different game you're playing. But Frederik, you've actually tried 2 different methods, right? So you went open and you went closed. What are you going to do next time and why?
We're probably going to do open again, mostly because of the community. So going back to both what Nick and you mentioned, we also have practically no resources in terms of PR internally. I was quite surprised that you guys had 7 at Daedalic, because that's to me is a lot. That's a big PR team if you also use agencies. We have 1, and that's our VP of communication, and that is for us enough. We of course need the assets created. We don't have resources for that besides our art directors and artists and so on. They create our own assets. They know best how to portray them, and he can advise them, say this is the message we want to portray. But that's the only one we have. When we did our first game, we actually spent a lot of time networking, and the keyword is parties. That is literally where you meet these people. From 2013 and until now, we've been at pretty much every major game convention, and we don't necessarily go there because we want to show off our game when we want to talk to other developers and so on. We go there so we can see all the games, of course, and to go to the parties, because at these parties you meet all the high-end journalists, and you get to mingle with them, and you get to socialize with them, and you get to, hey, thanks for that beer last night. Oh man, did you see what that guy did, and so on. All this stuff
It was my strategy 10 years ago when I was younger, but now I feel that these parties are quite forcing.
Exactly, they are forced. Everyone has to go to them, but that's where, in my experience, that's where I've met these people. That's where I socialize with these people. That's where I've gotten to know these people. And you meet those at all of these conventions. You see them again, and you thanks for last, and so on. Then you start emailing. You write on Facebook with them, and so on. You get a personal relationship with those high-end, quote-unquote, journalists. And that is to build a portfolio of journalists. You know their exact taste, you know what types of stories they like to write, and so on. And then when it's time for you to reel your game or put out some marketing assets, you know exactly who to sell that story to. And that's what our VP of communication does. he basically takes all of our leads together in the meeting, and we talk about what are the main beats of the game, what are the unique selling points, and so on, and how can we sell these stories, for instance, the reveal story, to someone. Who does that fit? Well, that fits Nathan Grayson from Kotaku, for instance. Then we contact Nathan Grayson and say, hey, Nathan, thanks for last. We have this great new title. We think it will fit you really well. That is really important when you're small and you don't have, again, a $1 million marketing team. And yeah, everything gets produced internally.
But what do we do if we're 10 introverts?
With what?
We're 10 introverts. What are we going to do?
See, that's again, someone mentioned that find someone on your team who's not. I've always been introverted, but you.
So
can
we get
learn
someone
to be,
in. Who's not.
Usually when you're in a business that you like, if you're introverted because you love video games and you mingle alongside a lot of people who are also introverted video games, then you tend to be a little more extroverted because that's you're alongside your fellow nerds basically. And most of these things, the business people usually don't go to these things. It's very rare that you'll meet a high-end CEO at all these parties. You'll meet all the journalists and all the indies. But yeah, we spend actually a lot of time on being social with the community.
But you're going open development next time.
Yes.
So how are you going to structure that? You're looking at 3 years of posts?
No, actually our next game is 4 months. 5 months from release. Right now, we haven't announced it yet. We've been teasing a little bit, but again, the next game is it's a different case because once we reveal it, people will know that it is a spiritual successor to something that is very well known and loved dearly by many. So we can play a lot on that. And
I hear shots fired. That's going to be a shooter.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's going to be a platformer. But it's so when you can reveal something that is either a sequel to something well known, it makes everything a little bit easier in terms of exposure, but also makes things a lot harder in terms of what you have to deliver, because all of a sudden you have to live up to the previous game.
But where does it become open if you're not announcing
so
it?
in this is going to be open because for this game compared to our last game, we want to know what fans expect from a game like this. We want to show them this is our process. We want to be able to get feedback during development, during the last 4 or 5 months of development. That's where we have that is basically our timeline for. We need feedback now within the next few months if we're able to fix anything before release.
So it's like early access, something like that?
It won't be early access, but we'll start showing off the game. We'll start talking about it. We'll start sharing developer videos. We'll start doing live streams. We'll start doing live sessions. We'll do maybe a beta for the game so people can try it out.
But future games might be closed development again. It's again, like Carsten says, it's unique for every game.
It's unique for every game. Again, we've been fortunate to work on games that are sequels to stuff people already know. So the stories kind of write themselves. But with Bombshell, that was really hard because that was an original IP, and that's why we got this guy on board. Our main communications guy. He had a lot of experience from a lot of other big titles, and he knows exactly who to talk to and when to do it and how to pitch the game to journalists and so on. But again, we have one guy that does this, and then we use different firms, different agencies to help us out. We used to use. You probably know Evolve PR. They also worked with Devolver, who we're very close to. Devolver is literally 3 Realms.
They do ambitious. Devolver is definitely.
It's like the ex-3 Realms guys who created a new company. So they're like our closest friends and our closest competitors at the same time. But yeah, that's how we do it.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 5 minutes left. I want to just ask you, Salima, our company badly wants a publisher. Is there any way to leverage PR for that? Trade magazines, any way to go about it?
I would say that, again, if your game is good, you'll find the money, whereas it's with a publisher or without a publisher. So this is very important because no deal is better than a bad deal in the end. But if you really want a publisher, it shouldn't be your ultimate goal. Your ultimate goal should be to make the game you want and the game you like. Because if you just are desperate to get some money, you can just end up with a publisher that will just put a big license on your game, and you'll end up very frustrated, and you may not come up with a game that you're proud of. So if you want to work with a publisher, wrap up a demo, but don't tell too much, and go to business meetings, go to E3, just, you know, if you have a little bit of money, go to Gamescom, meet people, ask friends as well who are already working with publishers, and pitch your game. There are a lot of people from the acquisition side that can advise you as well.
So you're talking about going to the markets and booking meetings and just pitching.
Pitching, like, to very happy few. But on the other hand, if you make your game with Unity, for example, use also like all the opportunities you have. For example, there are like the Unite conferences, you can ask for help or tips. There's a Unity Award as well, where you can go and ask for people, and you can self-publish your game as well. Of course, if your game aims to be a retail game, you definitely need a publisher, or at least a distributor. But if your game is a mobile game, or if it's a game that you'll put on Steam, you might not need a publisher. I don't think so. But you just really need to ask yourself, why do you need a publisher? Do you need a publisher because you need the money? Do you need a publisher because you need the marketing? Or you just need self-confidence?
Ooh, that hurt.
This is very important.
Yeah,
Some games actually don't need publishers.
No. I think
one of the big
takeaways from me here is the whole relationship personality thing. You know, be yourself, be strong, go to parties, build relationships, and all of that. It's going to be tough. I mean, we got into games to play with computers, not with people. You know? Okay, so what I'd like to do is, if there's any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, let's take that.
Just a quick question. Nobody's mentioned Let's Play videos and Twitch streams and stuff like that. Is that because you shouldn't use that, or are there any comments on that?
Maybe I can start because it's quite important for us on one side. On the other side, with storytelling games, obviously, when you we had this discussion for when we released Deponia Doomsday. When we go to Let's Players, and there's quite a big exposure with big Let's Players, and it's also the reason that our audience, which was classically maybe people from 20 to 50, so now we have also people under 20, which is related to the Let's Play phenomenon. But with storytelling games, when you see, let's say, 3 or 4 parts of a game, and our games then are like a TV show or a soap opera, and if you see then already 2 hours of the gameplay, we see in the comments, oh, I won't buy the game, I will follow on with because our games normally are quite linear, and even if they are non-linear, then it's quite okay for people only to watch the Let's Play. So for sandbox games, well, some genres, it is very good, but also the changes we see with the Let's Playing community, it's quite difficult to approach to these people, and now that also the AAA companies are in that specific scene and approaching to all that big Let's Players and giving them a shitload of money, that makes it very difficult.
So
Anybody else?
So yeah, I'll cover the other side of what you mentioned. You talked primarily about your game and how it can influence it with Let's Players and so on. The PR side, marketing side is also extremely important. There's a big reason why many bigger sites like Game Trailer, for instance, just closed. There's been other big sites that are closing down, mostly because they can't live off ad revenue anymore, because bigger studios and smaller studios don't get that much more exposure out of ads than what they do out of Let's Plays. And Let's Plays and YouTubers and Twitch streamers give them currently way more exposure than most ads will do in terms of websites, because simply people don't go that much more to gaming websites. There's a very small few selection left, and then a lot of small bloggers that show up. So Let's Plays are extremely important, and we actually had this discussion with our new game. We talked about the strategy in terms of Let's Players and streamers. Do we want to reach out to streamers for this because we're afraid that they are going to spoil the story of the game, because our game is very story-driven? It's a different thing if you have a game like League of Legends or something like that that's not necessarily story-driven. You're afraid that the game is going to get spoiled. But our VP of communications had a really, really good argument that it's just eyes on the game. It doesn't matter if it gets spoiled or not, because if you're watching videos of this game, you don't care about being spoiled. That's why you watch it. Maybe you.
That's like film trailer. So this is a discussion we also have in our studio with every trailer we produce, and we need to have an impact with the trailer. But if you show nothing, with every scene they say, oh no, we can't spoil anything. finally, I think we should spoil everything because we need to have a very good trailer, and then people, and then we have some comments who say, oh, they spoiled everything. But finally they saw the trailer because people talk about the trailer.
We talk about it all the time. Like whenever we see a movie trailer at the studio, we are furious that they're spoiling the whole movie, but we're also starting to really understand it because we do the same with our game. And in the end, it's about selling it. It's the same with the Let's Players, the YouTube streamers. It's about selling the game. So take every single cool moment you have in that game and put it in the trailer if that trailer is going to sell your game. Yes, people are going to get furious when they finish the game that, oh shit, they spoiled all the cool cinematics. Well, you bought the game. If we hadn't done that, you probably wouldn't have bought it. And that, like, think about that whenever you watch, like, when you watch the Batman v Superman trailer and every cool scene is in the trailer, think about if they hadn't shown that trailer, would you have watched the movie? So
that's great.
So I think there's a timing thing involved in this as well. We've used Twitchers and Let's Players for Hitman, and we didn't pay them anything. We did have one person practically full-time chasing down these people and talking to them and selling them.
For how long?
For probably 3 months prior to release, just to get them to sort of, some of them knew Hitman and were interested in Hitman already, but getting it confirmed, getting it in their calendars, which are ridiculously booked and so on, that's a huge undertaking. I think in terms of spoilers and things like that, we were of the same mindset actually. We didn't want to spoil too much, but then again, we looked at the campaign that we'd done, and Paris, the first episode was pretty much laid bare already. So we figured, okay, let's see actually what kind of buzz we're getting from this. So we did a few Let's Plays just before release, and then a whole bunch afterwards, and it has boosted the amount of views that we had on YouTube by numbers that you wouldn't believe. I mean, the end goal that we had for the campaign in terms of video numbers was reached, I think, a week after we released the first episode. Effectively meaning that we actually managed to double the amount of views we wanted in a week.
Well, compare that to if you'd done ads in magazines and
websites.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we do both, right? The one thing that I will say is that we cannot, at least I can't, and I don't know if this is company policy or not, but I can't necessarily see the sort of the purchase value of that. I'm not sure that if you get 30 million views of someone playing your game, that doesn't translate 1-to-1 or even one minuscule percentile to actual sales, right? So figuring out how that actually works, is this actually valuable exposure or not, is a huge unknown to us right now as well.
That's all we have time for. I think that was a fantastic session. Thank you very much. This is really good advice. I think I've got some insights. We're going to be back in 15 minutes with Stephen Dermidian from Supercell. And if you're talking about Viking ships, this is one of the really fucking huge... Am I allowed to say fucking? This is a big Viking ship. So come back in 15 minutes. You can get 2 cups of coffee this time. Thank you.